afternoon. So I wanted to record a little talk about awareness, I suppose, or the direct perception of that. Somebody was discussing with me just now on good old Facebook. So the direct perception of that. Why do we call it that and not this? So, that implies distance, doesn't it? It implies that it's far away, it's something outside me, it's over there, that over there. Whereas this is something nearer. But this is that, right? The subject is the object. The subject meaning the one who is aware, or perhaps we could say awareness. That's the subject. Maybe we can say this. And the object, the thing which is present in awareness, or which some reflection of is present in awareness. For example, if I'm looking at the tree over there, you could say the tree is in my awareness, but that's not entirely correct. What's actually in my awareness is the light that's reflected off the tree and going into my eyes, and then my brain is building up a picture of the tree, an image of the tree, a direct perception of the tree. So what's in my mind is an image of the tree, but just over there is the real tree, right? So there's an observer and an observed in that sense, a subject and an object. Right? The subject is the observer, the awareness, and the object is the thing that's being observed, the tree. So in standard Newtonian physics, a mechanical way of looking at the world, we can say there's a subject and an object, an observer and an observed, and they're different. Now, of course, the mystical position, the non-dual position, is to say, hang on a minute, are they really different? Where's the boundary? Where's the boundary between me and the tree? So I could say, well, my awareness is something in my mind, isn't it? It only exists in my brain. Maybe we can say that in a mechanical sense. And then we say, okay, well, where are the boundaries around the brain? Well, the brain is a mass of neurons which expands actually not just inside the skull but down the spine and then out through my body to all the nerves, all the neurons, in other words, in my skin, my eyes and my nose and my ears, my senses. So there's no boundary between the brain and the skin, for example. The skin is part of the brain. When something touches my skin, that immediately affects my brain. Electrical signals and chemical signals shoot around in my body and mind, and the brain is affected. And it's not just there either. We can't draw the boundary around the skin because, of course, the wind and the light is coming from outside and touching my skin. So all of it is part of the brain. There's no boundary, it's only connections. So the atmosphere, the air between me and the tree, is carrying sounds from the birds there that are sitting in the tree. The crows are cawing at me. So the air is carrying those pressure waves. So the air itself is part of the brain. It's not separate from the brain. If you removed that air somehow, so it was a vacuum, obviously I would die, but also the sounds wouldn't come through it. Sound doesn't travel very well through vacuum. On the other hand, light travels perfectly well through vacuum, and that's the other thing that's happening, isn't it? The light from the tree is coming through space across the, well, it's gone 93 million miles from the sun, and then it's reflected from the tree and back 20 yards into my eyes. And all of that is part of my brain. If you take away the sun, none of that happens. Firecrackers at the Taoist temple over there are also part of my brain. It's okay, it's not a terror attack, it's just people chasing away evil spirits by burning firecrackers. Quite a long stream of firecrackers there. I'm sure the evil spirits are very impressed and have all left. Yeah, no, I like the Taoist temples we have in Phuket. Quite interesting places. Lao Tzu, the author of the Book of Changes, Tao Te Ching, isn't it? Yeah, they have a nice image of Lao Tzu in the temple there. It doesn't look like I thought of him. I mean, when I think of Lao Tzu after reading the book, my image is somebody who looks a bit like Krishnamurti, you know, very thin, maybe quite happy and smiling, but the image in the temple shows him as somebody very fat, with a very fat laughing face. Of course, the Chinese laughing Buddha as well is a very fat image, very different from the original Buddha images in Gandhara, which show the Buddha very thin, as you would expect from the stories in the scriptures, where, you know, before his enlightenment he was very austere and didn't eat very well for a long time, and then the story goes that he ate a bowl of rice with milk, which was a big luxury. So he kind of went for some nice luxuries and then sat down under the bo tree until he achieved enlightenment. So what is awareness? And where is the boundary between the awareness and the objects of which it is aware? And when we really look at that, we can see that there isn't any boundary. It's all the same thing. What we think of as boundaries are in fact connections, just like the borders around a country. We think of if you think of North Korea, for instance, a country with huge fences and machine gun posts and so on to keep people in and also to keep people out. We think of that as quite a hard boundary, but actually it's the connection with the neighbouring countries. It's the place where information and people and goods flow through. They have to flow through the border, maybe in a legal way through the checkpoints, or maybe in an illegal way with people sneaking through and running the risk of getting shot. But the point is that anything we see as a boundary is in fact a connection, and so there is no separation between the subject and the object. There's no separation between the observer and the observed. If we really look, we can see that it's all one big thing, which we can call Brahman if we want to use the traditional Indian idea, or we can call it the Tao if we want to use the Taoist idea. The one, the whole, all that is, what is. Yeah, many words we can use to point to it. But one of the really beautiful things I think about Krishnamurti's teaching is that he does talk about this direct perception of that, so that this is not just an abstract logical idea. I mean, you can follow what I've just said logically, and you can understand as an intellectual idea, okay, everything is interconnected, everything is dependent on everything else, it's all one thing. Very easy to understand. Logically, you can't argue with that, it's just a fact. But to perceive that directly is what we can call meditation, or some kinds of meditation. Of course, there are many different kinds of meditation, and not all of them are focused on that particular insight. But when we talk about formless meditation, the meditation that goes beyond form, I think this is what it is. This is the direct seeing. Seeing isn't quite the right word, because it's deeper than seeing. It's not really dependent on the senses. It's something you can do even if you're in a sensory deprivation chamber. So there's no sound, no sight, no light, nothing to smell or taste. There's still the presence of, presence. The fact of I am. So Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. For him, the fact that his mind was able to follow logical thoughts, to follow reason, to follow an argument, to think, is proof that the mind exists. Quite reasonable. I think, therefore I am. And we could also say, I talk, therefore I am, or I can feel the wind on my face, therefore I exist. There must be something here that can feel the breeze on my face. So every sensation is proof that there is such a thing as existence. Reality exists. And when we say I am, that's what this I is really. Brahman, we were saying before, it's the one thing that exists, because there is no separation. I can't draw a line around my brain or my body or my nation or my planet or anywhere else and say, okay, outside that is somehow not connected to me. It's not the case. Outside that is connected to me, is absolutely essential to me. It's not that there are two categories of thing. One thing is me and the other thing is not me. It's that it's all I, it's all me. Or equally you could say it's all not me. There's no boundary, and therefore there is no inside and outside. There is no observer and observed. There's just this one thing that is happening. That's a lot of talk for really an insight that's very direct and simple, and anybody can experience that directly for themselves, I think. All you have to do is sit quietly and listen, feel, be, notice the fact that you exist. Sounds very simple, doesn't it? Notice the fact that you exist. A lot of people seem to think that they don't exist. At least they claim they don't exist. And they claim to not know they exist. I think if we fall into the trap of taking words too seriously. We can get caught in ideas like nihilism, the idea that nothing exists, or solipsism, the idea that, oh, it's all just in my head, it's all just in my mind, I'm imagining everything. Yeah, neither of those are particularly helpful philosophies. Also, there's the idea that my guru is doing everything. So I don't need to do everything because my guru does everything, right? Or I don't need to do everything because the government is doing everything. I don't need to do it because God is doing it. I was just watching some people, American Christians, saying that climate change isn't a problem because Jesus will save us and God is going to look after the planet, so we don't need to pay any attention to climate change. So these are very silly ideas, I think. People take words far too seriously instead of looking at the reality. The reality is that our planet is in quite a bad way. We've got too many people burning too much fossil fuel. And so the planet is getting hotter and drier. And for a lot of people who live in countries that are already hot and dry, India being one prime example, this is the difference between life and death. Also the difference between being able to survive relatively happily and being starving in absolute misery. So this is quite a serious business. Fossil fuels. How do we transition away from fossil fuels when we have an international order which is predicated on every nation trying to get an advantage over every other nation? Every nation wants more energy so that they can make war on their neighbour and take over their country. In India you have Kashmir, the ongoing, effectively Cold War with Pakistan, not benefiting anybody. Of course, there's Russia and Ukraine. Again, neither side is benefiting from that war. Nobody is benefiting from it. Even Vladimir Putin is not benefiting from it. And yet, people are stuck in that situation. We don't know how to get out of it, apparently. People are very caught up on words like glory to Ukraine. We will not give the enemy 1 inch of our land. How glorious is it really when your entire country is reduced to rubble and hundreds of thousands of people are dead? Is that bringing glory to Ukraine? Probably not. On the other hand, it's certainly not bringing much glory to Russia either. Russia as well is seeing thousands of young men dying, spending vast sums of money on tanks and bombs, killing the neighbours, destroying the respect and brotherly love that used to exist between Russia and Ukraine, which have been allies certainly for the last century. Friends and allies. The Ukrainians and the Russians fought in the same army together many times, and now they're busy killing each other. So if we take words seriously, and if we don't look at the reality of what we're doing, and instead we just look at the words, then we stand to make those kind of mistakes. So I think meditation is quite important. Meditation meaning stepping back from the words and resting in this sense of oneness, resting in the fact of reality. Which is not my idea of reality or your idea of reality, it's reality, which I'm part of, and if you're listening to this, you are part of it too. So I find I spend far too much time on Facebook arguing with people about whether reality is real and other things like that. This question that I was asked to give a talk about this weekend of can we teach love? Can love be taught? Of course, Krishnamurti said no, you can't teach love, love cannot be taught. But then he went around the world giving public talks, and if you read those talks and read his books, it's pretty clear what he was trying to do. He was trying to get people to love a little bit more. Trying to teach people love is pretty much what he dedicated his life to. And he also said love is truth. So truth, again, I like to use the word reality. He more often used the word truth. It's the same thing, it's different words pointing to the fact. If we want to call that Brahman, that's perfectly okay by me. Sometimes Krishnamurti used the word reality in a slightly different way, talking about the kind of an idea that's in people's minds of reality. To me, I wouldn't use the word reality for that. I'd say that's an image of reality. The images in people's minds are always inaccurate, always less complex than the reality, and generally not as good as the reality. If I imagine a flower, what I imagine is something very simple, maybe quite pretty, but very simple. I could even paint it on a painting. But when I look at a real flower, it's very, very complex. I can look at it under a microscope and see the DNA of it and so on. Far more complicated than anything my brain can even imagine. So reality is much more beautiful and much more complex than anything we can imagine. And when we talk about love, which is truth, we're really talking in that sense about this mystical perception, which we can also call meditation. The fact of sitting without words, even if it's only for a few seconds. Sitting without words and just being aware. That's it. Okay, so that's enough for now. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed.